And Nick told me today we're going to talk about bi-vocational ministry. Is that what's in your head and heart today? Talking about? Okay. And anybody here thinking that they're going to be bi-vocational? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, maybe. Some of you are going, I don't know if I want to do that, right? I mean, it's like, we all hope, we all dream that there's a big organization somewhere or one big donor that's going to finance our ministry. And if you find one, I will bless you and thank God with you. We will celebrate. But that's not normally the path that God has for people. So let's begin with prayer. Just a little bit about Bridges. Bridges is a mission organization that helps leaders who want to serve like missionaries do around the world. I mean, if you're a missionary that's going to Africa, you would raise support. Unlike in the Peace USA, I was a Peace USA missionary, and I didn't have to raise support, right? We have a general pot, and they're paying for everybody to go. But I knew, this was back in 1995, when I was appointed as a missionary to Ethiopia. Even though we didn't have to raise our support, I could see, you're all entrepreneurs, we can see a little bit farther than everybody else, right? When you're looking out, it's not supernatural, it's just seems so obvious. And I was looking at funding in our church and I said, wow, they might have enough money to send us as missionaries this year, but I'm pretty sure if we're going to make a lifetime of this, we're not going to have a free pass for our entire time of service. So I began immediately building relationships with churches and individuals and casting the vision. I never asked for money, right? But just casting the vision, communicating on the computer every morning in Ethiopia for like an hour, typing emails to people across the United States. Within 3 years, we were fully designated, meaning people were sending in money and churches were sending in money that equaled 70% of our salary. So even though I didn't need to do it, and of course we've seen that the time has now come where missionaries do need to raise their own support. Ones that aren't on the field sometimes are, being encouraged to early retirement, things like that. So there's still a bold desire in the Peace USA to send missionaries around the world in the traditional methods, but bivocational and raising support are more likely. So in Bridges, we are specifically designed for people who want to be bivocational. Okay. And almost lost it. I'm guessing that Nick showed you this picture, but I want you to know he got it from me. Has he shown you this? He hasn't shown you yet. Oh, good. That's nice. Thanks, Nick. So take a look at this. What do you see?
A bridge.
A bridge.
Yeah.
Right. This is in Florida. Okay. You notice the river doesn't go under the bridge. The reason is a hurricane went by. You can see the devastation of the hurricane. Everything's like washed out. And yet you can see off in the side here, you can see some green area. And what this is the bridge did not move. Okay? The river moved. The erosion during the storm, rivers wind anyway, and they erode, and then the winds break through, the water breaks through the banks, and so you can see even right here, there's a little bit of water down here at the bottom. That's the old bend in the river that used to go under the bridge. Right? Now it's abandoned. Okay. Is this bridge a good bridge or a not good bridge? Not good? Not good? I want to argue that this is one of the best bridges in the world. I mean, I was in Africa, we built a bridge, too many donkeys get on it and it collapses, This bridge made it through a hurricane. It was designed to withstand a hurricane. The road is washed away, the rivers moved, but that bridge stands. I'm telling you, I'm Presbyterian. It was Presbyterians who built this bridge. Let me tell you. We had a committee, right? We had the top-notch people. We didn't hire some cheap contractor. We hired the very best. And we had inspection controls, and we managed the money well, and we made sure the concrete wasn't watered too thin. You know, we made sure that the designer designed a bridge that withstand the hurricane, and then we actually went out to the site while they built it and made sure those trusses went down the number of feet they were supposed to go down, that they were the distance apart that they were supposed to be apart. This bridge was made at great cost and with great skill. And I would say that's the church in America today. That bridge represents the existing church in America. It was made very well, it's designed to last, and it's actually a very good bridge, doing exactly what it was built to do. Of course, we know there's a problem here, right? The problem is not with the bridge. The problem is everything around it changed. Right? Society in America has completely changed. You know, I had a pastor friend who used to say, if the 1950s ever comes back, the Presbyterian Church is locked and loaded. We're ready to go. You know, because we really have an institution that would really work in that context. Unfortunately, America is a different place. Now, so in America, there's 100 million people who know life on the bridge. Okay, 100 million people are going to church on some kind of regular basis, and they feel comfortable on the bridge. Okay? Across the river now are 200 million people in America that when they look at the church, they look across the river and they see that bridge. What do they see? Doesn't make any sense, right? Now they're looking at a bridge, there's no river under it. They're going, what is that bridge for? You know? Why are so many people excited about the bridge? And what Bridges is based on the assumption and the truth that the culture on the bridge has become so different from the culture on the other side of the river that it takes cross-cultural missionary skills and a missionary approach to help people follow Jesus on the other side of the river. If you want to reach people who are already comfortable on the bridge, hats off to you. That's good. We need a lot of help on the bridge. I am called, and the people in Bridges are called, and I know some of you here are called, I hope all of you are called, to the 200 million people who, when they look at the existing church, don't understand what's going on. So what we do in Bridges is we train leaders to leave the culture of the bridge, cross the river, and live here, move in. One of the most controversial things I'll say today probably is you have to choose. You cannot continue to make your life on the bridge and be successful as a missionary on the other side of the river. When I went to Ethiopia, I had to get on the plane, land in Addis Ababa, get off the plane, and make new friends, find a new way to shop for food, find a new way to exercise. Every single thing about my life had to be done in that new culture. And if I'd have flown back to America once a week, would I really have ever made lifelong friends in Ethiopia? Would I really have entered deeply into people's lives and helped them? And see what happened when I moved from here to Ethiopia? Guess who changed? Me. Right? The number one person who changes first is me. I have to learn their language. I have to join their culture. I have to figure out how to be a friend in their culture. Who needs help? I need help. I don't even know how to use the toilet. I was living with an Ethiopian family, and they were a very wealthy family in Ethiopia. I'm living in this house. And I took a bath in their bathtub for, I think, 2 weeks before I figured out that the thing hanging in the corner of the room was a hot water heater. I'd been taking cold baths for 2 weeks because I didn't know to go over and turn the button on that would heat the water. You know, in America, you just turn the hot water on, it comes out, right? So the idea is it requires a missionary approach in America. Now, you can move into unchurched culture and actually not act like a missionary. I could have gone to Ethiopia, and instead of learning their language and making Ethiopian friends, I could have hung out at the mission station, spoken English with other missionaries, gone to the international church. See what I mean? Just moving in doesn't mean you actually change cultures. You still, even when you move into an unchurched neighborhood, you have to choose to give up the culture you were in, to live in the culture that God's called you to. Right? Because when Jesus came to this earth, he came here and spoke our language. Jesus didn't stay in heaven and go, hey, you know, if you guys get interested in God, you know where we are. Right? You can come if you want. All are welcome. You know, no, Jesus came to earth, the incarnation. So we actually, when Jesus says, you know, go and make disciples, when Jesus says, follow me, Jesus is saying, leave the culture of the church and follow me into the culture of the unchurched. Right? Why did Israel get in so much trouble and end up in exile? Because they lost their vision that they existed for others. Right? They became inward focused. You can become a Jew. You know, you could become a Jew during the time of Jesus. Right? They were Jewish. The synagogues were inviting Gentiles to come through a process to become a Jewish follower of Yahweh. But the radical thing that Jesus did is saying, no, don't just wait for people to come to you. You have to go and make disciples. And when Jesus said make disciples, it wasn't make disciples of people who are in the church. Right? I recently wrote a description of a committee and submitted it to our presbytery, and I had in there discipling unchurched people. And someone in the office corrected it and put evangelizing unchurched people and discipling Christians. But that's not what Jesus said, go and make disciples. And the only people out there to disciple were people who were not Christians. Right? So, you know, I get in trouble for this. You've got to leave church culture. I'm not saying you can't worship. I'm not saying you can't go to a worship service somewhere with Christians, but you have to make a choice to leave the culture and join the unchurched culture. Okay. Now, that's any comments on that? Anything? Have you heard this 1,000 times, or is this like a little pushing it? Yeah.
I like the idea you said, and it comes out of your background. I think as a churchman, I will have a missiology approach. I took a course called Biblical Theology of Mission before. It was one of my last classes, and I really liked you read the Bible as a mission book. It's about God's mission.
Yeah.
And I really like what you said. It really makes sense to me. It's going to be my approach.
Okay. Yep. All right.
I think in my experience, it seems very hard to do that with other Christians. And even, like, I've been on staff for 4 years at a previous church where I'm their college pastor. And, churches have certain structures, confinements, certain just things you have to do. So it becomes very difficult to go to new places and to do that with others and to retrain others to even do that. And you recognize that even you have stuff warring in you that, yeah, I love being around these people. I get other pastors. I mean, so you
Yeah.
have stuff even internally, but as a whole, it's very hard to really get outside of,
Yes.
a Christian subculture.
Yeah. So like this Christian culture that we're in is like a river pushing us in a direction. And when we try to go a different direction, it's like turning around in a river.
Yeah.
And the water's just pushing on you. Your pastor's calling you on the phone and said, we'd really like you to head up our college ministry. And to say, no, I'm not called to care for those in the church. I'm called to care for those outside of the church. Usually the answer you get is, well, half of our folks don't go to church anywhere. They're coming here, but they don't go to worship. See, so there's the pushback, But see, culturally, what they're asking you the work in the culture that's inviting people. See, it's hard to cross the river, right? If it's hard for us, imagine how hard it is for people outside of the church when they turn around in their culture and try to start moving towards the church. They're hitting that same kind of resistance, right? Okay, someone else?
I think what I learned from my house church system, my church, is that even though in church people have spiritual needs, they just like us in church, they struggle with things in their daily lives.
Yeah.
And I think if you're open-minded to that, it really bridges.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a bridge between our culture and their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you show your Christian life how you deal with your daily issues. And I have seen it more than once that actually they were attracted to our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But we can expect them to come to us and worship us together.
Right.
But
Yeah, when I went to Ethiopia, there's lots of Ethiopians who would love to come to America, right? And there's some that love to stay in Ethiopia but become Western. And then there's some that want to stay in Ethiopia and stay Ethiopian, right? They want to hang on to their culture. And you can reach, God can call you to any one of those groups. He can call you to the people who come to the church. He can call you to the people that will come to the church if you reach them. Or God can call you to the people that won't come to church and will never come to church because they love the culture they're in. And that's the most missionary posture needed there for that group. Because the truth is there's 92 million people in Ethiopia. And if you just reach the group coming to America and the group that wants to be Western, you're only going to reach 10 million of them. You'll leave 82 million out there. In America, we have 100 million people in this orb of culture and 200 million people in the other. So, who's going to the 200 million? Anyway, that's a basic framework for bridges and for how I see America. Let's talk more about being bivocational. Okay, so let's assume, how many people feel like they're called to genuinely reach people who don't go to an existing church and aren't going to make the cultural journey to the church? How many feel like they're in that boat? Interesting, right?
I guess just a point of clarification, I don't see those mutually exclusive. So it's not like either you're going for the 200 or the 100. So.
Well, what happens is with these three groups of people, you may intend, of course you can always have the intention to reaching everybody, but your method in the very culture in which you approach it, they're going to choose whether you're for them or not. I mean, every church puts welcome everyone on their front. But if you talk to people in town, everybody knows which culture is there and who goes there and whether it's for them or not, right? So you can intend to reach any of those, but the reality is missionaries for the last 2,000 years, when we go, we primarily, your method and your approach will end up with a match to who you're reaching. So to reach those 200 million, you use a different method, a different approach than if you're trying to reach people who are willing to come to the church culture. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think ideally, since we have the gospel, we think we could reach anyone. Even if I think about my background, I think God wants me to reach a certain group, a certain culture, and by using my background. So, I think we have to accept it.
Yeah.
The gospel is very open-ended, but we are not, and God is using us as a vessel. So if you just say not self-aware, being self-aware of that, you might, it's just like the picture is just explains so well what the reality is. And it's not about faith and not having faith, it's also about the cultural aspect. The church is so detached from the society right now. It's just sometimes you don't even realize how different it is.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like the fish in the ocean. You think your ocean's just right for everybody, but you don't understand that there's birds, right? And when you see a bird, you think, well, they could come to the ocean if they wanted to, because you see birds coming in and swimming on the ocean. You see birds diving into the ocean, and you think, well, birds are welcome here, right? But from a bird perspective, yeah, well, I'm welcome, but that's not my home, And there's nothing wrong with the ocean. The ocean's wonderful. We could spend a lot of time talking about this, but, obviously you see where I'm coming from. My contention is you cannot be two cultures at the same time. Every time someone talks about multicultural, what they really mean is they're getting a bunch of people from different cultures together, and they're slowly creating one culture together. Everybody gains some, everybody loses some. And you create a new culture together. In the end, you only have one culture. Because let me tell you, when you're living in a foreign country, you either have the call to prayer 5 times a day or you don't. You can't have it and not have it at the same time. So you can't start things a half hour late and start on the hour. You have to, you might have a group that shows up for everything 30 minutes past the public time. And you might have a group that comes right at the public time and a group that comes 15 minutes before the public time. But when you actually get together the group, you can only start at one time. The group is going to figure it out. They're going to adjust over time. They're going to start coming 15 minutes after the hour. Might be the group consensus. But you can't have it every way. You can't have a shame-based gospel that's the primary gospel in your community and a guilt-based gospel. That's the primary gospel in your community. The gospel in Harambe in northwest Pasadena, their primary text was David's mighty men and how these men could be used by God even though they operated outside the normal economic system. Right? They're on welfare. They're cheating the government and getting money when it's called the welfare hop. The social worker knocks on the door and the husband jumps out the back door and over the fence because they're getting welfare based on a single mother, right? So they're pretending there's no dad. Well, they're doing stuff like that. Could God still use me? David's mighty men who went out there, and it was like a gang that provided protection to farms on the outskirts of Saul's kingdom and were able to, it was a dark economy. So the gospel for them is going to be a different gospel than me at La Cañada Presbyterian Church. We would never have that gospel. We're running the companies. So it's hard to have, cultures really are different. And it's, that's not a problem, that's an opportunity, right, for all of us. Now, we want to get to bi-vocational ministry, okay? Now, all of us, whether we like it or not, we have to operate with some kind of funding, right? You cannot eat air, the last I checked. Air seems to be free in America so far. Clean air, that might cost you a little more. but you've got to, Bobby Clinton called it a stable base for ministry, that you've got to have a place to live, you've got to be able to pay your rent, you've got to be able to buy the baby formula or the diapers, right? if you don't have some of those basic things in place, ministry falls apart. So, if you raised your hand and you said you were going to serve these people over here, the 200 million who don't go to church anywhere, okay, so who's going to provide the funding? Give me a specific example in your ministry. Where do you expect the funding to come from?
We apply for grants and stuff via the denomination, and then maybe churches that wanted to help start a church to begin with.
Okay, so which denomination are you in?
We're RCA right now.
RCA,
Yes.
okay, awesome.
And then also, I would work outside the house, for sure.
Okay,
I
so
wouldn't work within the church.
grants from the denomination, churches that you go and visit, right?
Churches, yeah, that would want to help.
Okay.
And then hopefully we become sustainable. So the people that we find within the other side start to give and
Mhm.
help sustain us. But I mean, we would always be a 2-income family, so
Right.
that would always
You,
work.
you notice how your voice changed? Did you hear her voice change? It was like grants from the denomination and other churches, and then hopefully becoming self-sustaining. It was kind of like you weren't sure. Like, does that reflect what you're saying? Like,
Yeah, well,
You're not
you
sure
don't
about
know.
that.
You don't know for sure. Especially
Uh,
with people that didn't grow up in the culture of giving
Yeah.
to church. It's
I
not
can tell you that I know for sure. Okay. The Apostle Paul knew for sure. How many years is your grant system?
I don't know.
Probably 3.
Okay, so you have 3 years of grants. How much?
It depends. I would probably-
50,000 a year, 70,000 a year.
It's probably like a total of like 150,000 or something like that.
So 50,000 a year for 3 years. Okay. The people who live over here in this other culture, how long do missionaries work in another culture before a church emerges?
A long time.
Before a self-sustaining church emerges?
Decades.
Missionaries went to Ethiopia over 100 years ago. The church, our partner church in Ethiopia, Makani Jesus, became self-sustaining about 2 years ago. Okay.
I'd just say, like, I'm becoming Anglican, but I come from a denomination, Assemblies of God, and they're
Yeah.
planting churches all around the country,
Right.
and they're becoming self-sustaining very quickly. Within like 2 to 3 years, that's their
Right.
general model.
Yep.
I was part of a church plant in Berlin, Germany,
Mm-hmm.
which is, if you're looking at the bridge and the percentages, where you might think 1/3 is on the bridge here,
Mm-hmm.
you've got maybe 2% of the whole country
Mhm.
that would be on the evangelical bridge, depending on how you drew up the bridge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was part of an awesome church plant there that was self-sustaining within like 2 or 3 years, and it's growing and doing really well.
Great.
So
Yeah.
I think that it definitely can be done. I don't.
Well, and let's dig into that. So who are the kinds of people that came to the church that financially supported it? Were they people who grew up in church or people who had never been to church?
I guess a mixture of people they were reaching and people that were moving to the big city that were looking for a church, maybe.
Okay.
A little of this and a little bit of that.
Right. So it was a mixture of people, some from church backgrounds and some from not. Right?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, that's always going to be the case in America because we've got so many Christians here. I mean, I don't see 1/3 of the country as a small amount. That's like a crazy amount of Christians in a single, like, we're still very Christian, you
Mhm.
know.
Right.
Even Atwater Village has a Christian bookstore, you know.
Right.
So if your town's got a Christian bookstore, I mean, non-Christian bookstores can't even stay open. So if you got enough Christians to buy books, you've got random Christian folks that are show up in your, like, you can't open a church here in LA and not have Christians show up. Because
Correct.
evangelicals are moving here, they're
Okay,
going
and
to
you
want to be a
said
part of it.
open a church. Tell me what you mean by open a church.
You can't, have a website for your house church
Mhm.
and not have an evangelical come by and visit and want to be a part of that church.
Okay. A website, and particularly a worship service. Right? If you have a public worship service.
Right.
Yeah. As soon as you have a public worship service, then you end up with Christians coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is your desire to say like missional churches, like missional communities, I should say, I don't know if you're speaking there, but that people.
Yeah. The missionary approach is you have to join a community, learn their language, get into their worldview, suffer the things that they suffer, and together find Jesus together. You make disciples first. You start out with 1 disciple, 2 disciples, 3 disciples. You're forming your culture, the DNA of your movement is formed with those unchurched people. And you're nowhere near having a public worship service or a website.
But how would you make a disciple without a worship service?
I do it all the time. Did it in Ethiopia, do it here. I can bring them into my home. We could, I'll be at Denny's and we'll pray together. We can go to the park and I can teach them how to meditate. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to talk about finances, and
Yeah.
I think it's really important. I think for a church plan, it is really important. And even in existing churches, regardless of the size, could be
Yeah.
churches have 100,000 or 10,000. I believe that maybe 5% of the church members carry like 60-70% of the budgets.
Right,
There are big donors who make it possible in the church.
right,
And if you're a church plan and you don't have those big donors, which are disciples of the church,
right.
and they're going to be small number, and not coming up with the budget, you're in
Right.
trouble.
Yes,
Because if you're going to evangelize and make disciples, it's going to take maybe 3 years, 5 years, 7 years before they commit their life to the church, not only faith-wise, but also financially.
yes,
And that's how the church grows.
yeah,
So it really is, do you have a big donor around you who will carry the 5%, who
mhm,
will fill up to 60-70% of the church budget or not? And
right.
I think that's the way I see it.
Mhm. So it helps to have big donors if you have some, people that tithe,
Right.
right? If, what we're doing here, we're playing with 2 different models. There's a high-cost model of doing church, where that's true, and where, you start the worship service and some Christians come, and there's a low-cost model of doing church. It's the model that preceded Constantine, right? The early Christians didn't have big churches or big worship spaces, and they managed to do church for, 400 years. So it's not like this is new. You can have a discipling movement of small groups that flourish and spread throughout, millions of people, or you can do a high-cost model with a building and a full-time staff. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you're hitting at is, what I hear is actually the guy, I can't remember his name, who was at our meeting at Knox,
Mhm.
who's in finance,
Mhm.
and to where he was talking about, I'll explain a little bit. What he did is he's in finance, he makes a really good salary,
Yeah.
doing money and investment, and he made a commitment to just love his neighbors.
Mhm.
Really love them and be an open place where they can come and talk. And over the past 3 years, they've started to come in and start to trust him and listen to him. And so he's really if a church ever comes out of that, it's starting from nothing. And so, but he has a nice job and stuff. That's not something that's truly going to completely unchurched, no
Mhm.
church base.
Yeah.
And he has money coming in from his finance job that he has a lot of money in, and so he's able to do that.
Right.
And that's the only way that if you're going to do that kind of thing, you have to do something like that.
Right. So every method of funding is legitimate. But what you have to be really careful, you have to match your funding strategy to your church plant strategy. And what happens is, if you really want to reach these 200 million over here, okay, your strategy cannot assume that they're going to pay. Right? People who are generally unchurched, never been to church, don't understand what the church is for, have never heard about Jesus. Generally, they don't become disciples of Jesus who tithe quickly, right? So if you're on a 3-year or a 5-year grant, do not plan for these folks to to replace that. Make a different plan, right? If they do, great. Sometimes they do, right? Some missionaries go to countries and they labor for 40 years and they make 2 disciples. And there's never a public worship service. It's 2 generations later of missionaries that suddenly the church emerges, right? With public worship services. Other missionaries go to a tribe and like they've been waiting. They have a story in their history of someone's going to come and have a black book and is going to share the story about how God loves us. And, suddenly there's a church there and it's like 1 year, right? And every missionary's like, why not me, Lord? So it's like, Jesus says you spread the seed on the ground, right? And some's on the rocky soil and some, but as a missionary or as a church planner, God calls you to a soil. You got to recognize, do I have soil that's rocky? Is it the path? Not every called minister of God that goes to the unchurched is called to minister in the field that's ripe for harvest today, right? You go into a Muslim, like some of our bridge leaders are from Egypt, Rafat and Amal. They speak Arabic. They're working among Arabic-speaking Muslim background peoples in Alhambra. Okay, well, those probably aren't the people who are going to flock to Jesus in the next 3 years before the grant money runs out, right? So, go ahead.
I just wonder though if that may be true in other countries, but in the United States, and we're all planning on kind of planting there.
Right.
That's not necessarily true. Most of the people here, it's safe to say like 99 or like 95% of the people here are very familiar with Christianity or have experienced it or went to it as a child, or participated in it as a child.
Okay.
So it's not. So it may be like this missionary context in some ways, but it's shaped differently than like the missionary going to.
Well, tell me what context
Cambodia.
you're talking about. So what unchurched group of people do you find?
Yeah, I wouldn't call them unchurched. I would call them cynical, right? Like that's the generation that we have. We don't have people that are like unchurched and just are really unfamiliar.
Right,
we have a few.
But tell me the particular group of people that you're talking about.
Cynical people?
Yeah, tell me more about them. Are they Anglo-European background? Are they
I would say they're
suburban?
all over the place. A lot of the people that are living in LA are moving here. They're very cynical about Christianity because they experienced it and had a bad experience, or were beliefs that they just didn't agree with, or whatever that was. So the people that we're dealing with aren't necessarily the people that like Christianity is foreign. It's in many ways it's not. And I think like our missionary call is to present Christianity in a way that's not necessarily that's maybe for them more authentic or something like that.
We call those the de-churched, right? They've been to church, they had a bad experience, they're cynical about it, or they're just cynical about the church in general.
But I mean, like so all of us here that want to reach the other side of the river, like that's probably what we're almost all talking about, unless we're talking about like Cambodia or something where it's very different.
Well, where are you from? You're from
Michigan.
Michigan, okay. LA has 250 different languages spoken in this city. So we actually do have groups of people from all over the world. So, I mean, if you say, well, it's not like you're going to Cambodia, I could take you there, okay? And we could drive.
Yeah, but there's a reason they're here. They're not here to bring Cambodia to LA. They're here because they want to be Americans. Though Cambodia will certainly like have an influence over their culture. Like that is something that will be a part of them. They came here because they want to participate in American things, and like they're open to that. Is what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. Oh, they're definitely in cultural transition, right? They're leaving one culture and coming to another. And what we have is you have lots of levels of culture, right? There's American culture, like you come to America and there's this general thing we call culture. And then there's the culture of the suburban Anglo, and there's the culture of, the urban gang member. There's the culture of the prison here. Yeah,
In San Diego, the Hispanic population grows so much, it's now almost 50%.
yeah.
And the San Diego Presbyterian wants to plant 10 new churches
Mhm.
in those neighborhoods. But I guess I don't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
I don't know the culture. I don't think I'm going to go in that neighborhood and plant a church.
Right. Well, the point is, it's hard to make generalizations. Like, I totally agree with you that there's a group that's de-church skeptical, and that may be the people that you guys want to go reach, and that's great. You know, my experience with our 45 bridge leaders that are in Greater LA is that the general consensus that I hear from them is that most people simply don't have an opinion about the church. They're not skeptical, they're not negative, they're not positive, they just,
They don't care. It's not on the radar.
yeah, it's just not on the radar. So it's actually like, it's in a way, you know, it is very hard to cross the river, but once you do, there's a lot of hungry people out there who are ready. That if you will generally join their group and speak their language, they're not upset or hostile or negative. They're seeking spiritual truth too, and they just enjoy the conversation and the relationship and want to figure it out together.
Well, I think
So-
it's hard for people when you've maybe grown up in a certain context, like
Mhm.
you don't even know how to get to the other side of the river. You know,
Right,
so you're
yeah.
gonna think 99% of the population are either church or de-church, because that's all you ever have experienced.
Right.
And it's not easy to figure out, like, where are those places that, you know, first and second generation immigrants are who have no clue what you're talking about if you talk about church. And they're out there, and especially in urban centers. I mean, it's just, cities are growing and exploding, and like, even in places you don't expect, like there's a city in Iowa that like in the last 10 years, it's like, I mean, now white Caucasian is the minority. You know, and
Right.
those people, they don't have
Yep.
American church experience. And in some ways that's a really fantastic thing.
Yeah.
Because they haven't seen the hurt and the pain, you know, they're not kind of that cynical de-church side. But it is tricky to
Yeah.
figure out, like,
And-
where do you actually go, like, physically to meet those people?
Yeah.
To get involved in their world.
Where is their world?
Yeah.
It takes some effort to go
Yes,
find it.
absolutely, it does.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
effort.
Yeah, you think,
Hard.
yeah, I've talked with leaders that, you know, there's 2 folks from Korea that have moved into Tahunga near me, and they're like, wow, we can't find community here. And I've been there 11 years. I know there's community there. But they keep, you know, they haven't made the changes in their life that would put them in the streams of community that exist. So anyway, and see, every one of these is legitimate. Like if you want to reach folks who are burned on the church, that's legitimate. If God calls you to do that, do that. If God calls you to create a traditional church structure and invite people to come, do that. You know, bridges exist particularly for people who want to reach people who are really not in church culture. And it's a different set of skills to create a traditional church and get people to come, you know, which is, look at this one, right? Nick has done a hybrid kind of model. They have a worship service that it was done on a 3-year grant, and, you know, here it is. They're pulling people in to this community, and you're going to get a certain type of group. So, you know, it's all, one is not better than another. Do the one God called you to, right? And what I want to encourage you to take, make sure your funding strategy matches your call and the people you're reaching. That, you know, if you want to reach de-churched people, they are more likely to give sooner than the genuinely unchurched. Okay? Just, you don't know, as a missionary going into another culture, you don't know whether it's going to be 1 year before people tithe or 100 years. So you don't want a funding strategy that depends on being self-sustaining in 3 years. What that means is, like in Bridges, we train bivocational people to raise money like missionaries. We train you how to do relationship-based fund development, where because it's the people on the bridge, right? The funding is going to come from this 100 million. These are the people who are following Jesus, who are ready to give, who are committed. So the Apostle Paul, when he went on his missionary journeys, he would boast that he did not charge the unchurched. What's one of the biggest problems unchurched people have with the church? They're always asking for money. And you know why we're always asking for money? It's because we have a high-cost model in the United States. The only reason we have to ask for money all the time is because we've created these buildings and full-time salaries, highly educated staff, which I'm one of. I'm an MDiv. I have an honorary doctorate. I've been full-time salaried at a large church for 11 years before going full-time with Bridges. But that model demands a lot of money. See, when Christianity came across America coming west, we were building towns. So they literally built the first building in a town. When you build the first building, it is the community center. That first hall wasn't just the church. It was the courthouse during the week, right? You know how we walk into church sometimes with the cross? You walk down the center, right? And you put the cross up, and then at the end of the service, you take it out. That tradition comes in part because it was the courthouse during the week. Sunday was for worship. So you brought the cross in, put it on the wall, had your worship service, and at the end, took the cross out because now it goes back to being the community center, right? So if you had a Kiwanis meeting, it was in the same hall as the church service, which was the same hall for the town meeting, right? There was only one community center. And that's why we built churches, right? So think about how many community centers now exist in America. As someone who lives over here among the 200 million on the far side of the river, I can join the country club, the YMCA, the health club, right? The yoga studio. And they have fundraisers. My kid goes to school and I'm part of the PTA. And they have fundraisers. You see, because all of those community centers have to pay for staff and buildings. Okay? So when we're inviting someone to come to our bridge over here on this side of the river, what they hear is come support my community center. Come help pay the bills. And if I already have a community center, I need Jesus. Listen, I need church, but I don't need a community center. I have one. I mean, in America, we have confused and confounded the role of a community center and the role of a church. Buildings certainly are useful and helpful in church, but a community center has many purposes in a community. Right? And what we have in America is the whole church in America was built with those two things together. Now, the unchurched don't need a community center, and we keep trying to get them to take on another one. We need to have a way to invite them to follow Jesus without having them join our community center. Right? Their community center is a good community center. Okay? If you wonder if it can work, look at the Mormons. Okay, they have one church building, but they don't run youth programs. Why don't they run youth programs? They use Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts. Because the scouting program, the community already has a youth program. Why pay for another one? Use the one in the community. So if you can divide the concept of a community center from the concept of church, then you can see if you want to go into these other cultures, you use their community centers. Believe me, it's cheaper, right? And if you want to reach these 200 million, you can do all the work you want. If you want to build a community center or rent one, but let me tell you, it's a lot cheaper just to go use theirs. And imagine being friends with the guy in charge of the community center, and he just says, sure, come on in. Do you see how the funding goes along with the methodology? Right? So I would encourage you, if you generally want to reach people on this side of the bridge, either go for a low-cost model, or if you're still going to do a high-cost model, make sure you have a large amount of support back here from Christians on the bridge. So if you have a choice between a 3-year grant and a 5-year grant, which one do you take? 5-year.
Both of them.
Right, well, what they do, they'll say, okay, well, we'll give you $150,000 in over 3 years. I'll say, man, $150,000 is great. Could you do that over 6 years? I know it's less per year, but it's the same amount. And then you go get more supporters, maybe some individual supporters who are given $10,000 a year, or $5,000 a year, or $2,000 a year. Build your base of support. Don't be afraid to focus on building up a support base of individuals. Okay? The funding in America today is not in the hands of the middle class. The funding in America today is not even in the church. The funding in America today is among a group of individuals and families who own capital. It's those people that have the capacity to fund your ministry to the unchurched. They love Jesus, they have the capacity, and they're looking for opportunities because they know they've spent their life amassing this wealth. I mean, they genuinely want to know how they can help the kingdom. When you go and invite them to invest in the ministry you're doing, the money's not for you. Yes, it might be part of your salary, but that money is not for you. It's for the kingdom. It's for the unchurched that are out there. And so you invite them to invest in changing the lives of unchurched people and helping unchurched people follow Jesus. If you don't have the skill or you're afraid to go raise money, get a coach. Go to a seminar. Right? In Bridges, what we do is we have coaches specifically, all they do is coach missionaries how to raise funds. And it's not really about raising money, right? It's about relationships, casting vision, inviting people to invest. I want you to know there are people out there just really wanting to invest in the kingdom. And they just, if you don't come to them, the money's going to go somewhere else. The local college is going to approach them, the YMCA, the local hospital is going to approach them. They are getting approached. Every single one of these people in this upper class of people with capacity are getting approached constantly. And if you learn how to approach them and build relationships and trust and cast vision, they will support your ministry. I left Locking Out a Presbyterian Church a year and a half ago. Individuals, mostly individuals, some churches are supporting me, and that's where the money comes from. We have 13 different missionaries who are raising support, and have accounts. So it is working. It's not this is traditional for overseas, right? Not for America. So you're on an uphill, culturally it's an uphill battle. But it's changing. Okay, yeah, let's stop there and take questions.
I had a question. So do you advocate less? Because it sounds like, I know my wife's one, I know Matt's one, a few people here are people are like really saying, hey, I might put in 25 hours a week and not in church activities. Now, of course, some of those can obviously get us into the lives of people who aren't church, so that can be a mission field.
Right on.
But I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on when you think of the getting a job aspect? So just like besides individual supporting, which totally makes sense, but put that on the side. Like, what are your thoughts on either good jobs or how would you evaluate whether your bivocationalism isn't taking away from what you're hoping to do? Or any thoughts you have?
Sure. So let's talk about, that's the next topic, right? What time do we have now? What time? And we have until when?
11:30.
Okay, so we have another 23 minutes. So let's get to the jobs, okay? Any question on raising funds?
Has anybody
Go ahead.
has anybody had success with large
upfront gifts that they've used to harvest? Like, so I mean, like we were talking about taking the 6 years on the 150,000. Like, has anyone said, I'll take that 150,000 up front. I'm going to take my 10% interest from that every year. And I mean, you have $500,000 in the bank.
Oh, like take it up front and then use it as you go.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that like foundations work, you know, they're just harvesting they're harvesting the interest
Yeah.
on that
Not
capital.
touching the
It's
value.
I haven't seen the denominations do that. They generally give year-by-year grants. So I haven't seen anybody put 150 or 300 on the table from a church denomination. An individual would do that.
Yeah,
But the
just because
churches,
you're harvesting the interest and not the principal.
well,
You're doing it well.
But that's a great idea. See, here's an idea, right? That you could have this conversation. You know, you're with your denominational representative, and they're saying, you know, we want to give you this 150,000 grant. You say, you know, that's awesome. I'd like to get creative with that. Would you be open to an idea I have? You know, wait. Is it yes or no? You know, yes? Okay, then let me tell you about it. You know, what if we use that money like an endowment, and we'll just use the interest off of it? And you know what this idea I like about this idea is one of the challenges in, you know, church planning is maintaining a high risk tolerance in your team and in your group. And if you have 150,000 sitting there in a bank, treating it like an endowment, it encourages, you know, what happens is if you get too low on cash, the low risk tolerance folks start screaming, right? What? We hardly have any money. How are we going to run this outreach thing to these unchurched people? Because I don't know, you know. Well, we're gonna have tickets and have a, you know, we're having a barbecue and we're, well, but what if we don't have a lot of people and we bought all the barbecue and then we're going to lose money, right? But if you got a stash, it's always good. You know, like I've learned, it's good to have $20,000 stashed away somewhere for your low risk people so they feel comfortable and you can go at it. So, anyway. But good question. Yeah, talk to them about it and see if you can get them to agree. You know, yeah.
Just thinking about your metaphor of the bridge, do you think there's a lot of people that what they actually want to do is move the bridge? Like they feel called to fix the bridge and adapt it better to the world as it is today.
Yes.
And that's just as difficult as going somewhere with nothing and starting from scratch. But even a church like this, to me, seems more adapted for our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not full of people that are new to the faith. It's
Right.
full of people that were dissatisfied with the old bridge.
Right.
And in a way, they're just changing it. They're
Yep.
not starting a new thing completely.
Yeah. They didn't actually reach a new people group.
Right.
They brought, but it's still a good ministry because if the churches weren't working for those folks, now they're engaged and growing,
Yeah,
whereas
they've
before
simplified,
they weren't. Yeah.
they've simplified things. They, have changed the approach in a lot of different ways.
Right.
But fundamentally, they're still coming from the same culture.
Mm-hmm.
They're just trying to adapt what they've been doing to a further iteration.
Right.
You know.
Right. And yeah, so you can take traditional culture and just trying to change the way it looks and feels, and attract a certain amount of people to that. And and there's a lot of missionaries that did it that way, right? You have missionaries that went overseas and really didn't allow the local culture to form a church. They transplanted a culturally misfit. Now, did God still use it? Yeah. Like, God used it, and it's interesting to watch over generations that sometimes the second and third generations of Christian make that church more like the local culture
Right.
than the initial. So even though they didn't do that great of a job as missionaries, isn't that a great thing about serving God? Like, it doesn't end with us. Whatever we do well, whatever we don't do well, the Holy Spirit keeps working in people's lives, and God keeps forming His church. So yeah.
I wonder, my question is, how effective is even if you move the bridge, does that bring in unchurched people?
Well, when you mentioned de-church people, what changing some things about the bridge does is it re-energizes people that were coming to the old thing but got tired of it, and then with these just small changes are now more on board. But that's different than going to people that have no previous contact point and then trying to build something for them. And I think the problem is a lot of us can't distinguish between the two. You know, you hear missional church planners all the time talk about reaching people, but they're not always getting rid of everything like you're
Right.
advocating for a truly missionary sort of.
Yeah, and it's hard to get if you're basically a person who's operated in, you know, a set of cultures that are similar. It's very difficult to get this, that there's these groups out there, right? And so the people that get it more are sometimes the people who have lived a significant amount of time in a very different culture.
Right.
And even then, half of them don't get it. Because they went to the other culture, but they never really let that culture change them, right? I could go to China and eat at McDonald's the whole time,
Yeah.
you know. So it's, you know,
I don't think
Chuck
it's
Kraft writes about the transcultural leader in one of his books. The last one that was published after his death has the transcultural leader stuff in it. That's where I'm coming from.
I mean, Korean churches were, American missionaries went into Korea and planted American churches.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked because the church model was attractive.
Yeah.
But so the point is, if you go into a culture and your church model, or your culture is attractive, it will work.
Yeah.
But even in this current society, I think even the trend in Asians, they really want to keep the Asian heritage.
Mm.
So they might actually not think that the American church model is the best model for them, even in this country here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you think, oh, I'm just going to move the church, it might work in certain cultural contexts or in certain places,
Yeah.
but there's also a good chance it will not work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I think that's why we have to be more aware of the cultural context and not just assume it's going to work. I think still there's this presumption that we move the church and it's going to work. Why it's not? This is America.
Right.
But
Right.
what I see now that ethnic groups are actually more protective now about their culture.
Mhm.
And Hispanic culture, I think, is that way too.
Mm.
That's why I said I don't think I'm going to plant a church in those neighborhoods because
Mhm.
they have very proud of their culture.
Yeah.
And if you just move the church, it might not work. And I think it doesn't work. As I see it in San Diego. It just doesn't work that
Doesn't
way.
work.
I'm only, and I think they're,
Hold on a second, because I want to stick on the bivocational
Right,
topic,
right,
and this
right.
we keep moving back into kind of like conceptual understandings. But remember, each one of these models and you know whether you start on this side and serve on this side, or you serve on that side, or you try to whatever methodology you're using and strategy, it's all good. Make sure it matches the people you're going to. So if you were to plop me in Texas in a developing suburb, I might say a traditional church plant is the best model when they put in 50,000 new homes and people are moving into those homes and half of them are Christians. We got to do a traditional church plant, you know? I mean, so the thing about Los Angeles is like we're out of room. Like there are no more 50,000 homes going in. You know, we're like, this is just a place where there's not a whole lot of opportunity for that. You can try to make opportunities for that, for sure. Look at this church we're sitting in. But it's harder. Like it's the more mismatch you have between your method and the people you're reaching, the harder you're going to work with the less fruit, right? The more match you can get, and the more match, and what we want to address today is our funding pattern, okay? So talk to me later on if you have more questions about raising funds. Okay, I can help you with that. We have coaches for that. Let's go to the question about actual work. Okay, so what kind of work do you think would work well with being bivocational?
Maybe something that you already have a skill in.
Something you already have a skill in. That's right. That's right.
I'm gonna be.
You gotta love it. Okay, not just the skill, but you gotta love it. Like, don't pick something because you think it'll work in your church plant, but you really don't love it. You know, people can tell. Or, you know, if you're going to lead a yoga class, you know, you don't really like yoga, and you're just there because you think you can meet people, and you think it's a good place to meet people and get to know them and start discipling people. Yeah.
I think you might look for work in your target neighborhood or
Mm-hmm.
where you connect with the people you want to reach out to.
Yes. Yeah, so the work, the best kind of work is work that puts you in touch with the same people that's on your heart and your passion and your call, right? So Bridges, we have a group down in North Hollywood right now, but the two people who are leading it work outside of their area, right? So one's working in a big building in Glendale up on the 4th floor, and another's working downtown, and they're in this urban, you know, impoverished neighborhood with gang violence. Well, does it work? Yes, they can go to work out there, but now they're trying to fit 20 hours a week with unchurched folks around jobs that take 40 to 50 hours a week. Okay, well you're gonna get tired, right? So if your work can be with those people, and it doesn't have to be geographic, right? You could be far away, but the people in your neighborhood, that's where they go to work, right? Think in terms of people, not in terms of geography. You could get a job right in your neighborhood, but no one in your neighborhood shops there or goes there during the week. The people that work at that 7-Eleven may live 2 cities over, right? Yeah. So like when I hear yoga and personal training, those are pretty good gigs for being people-oriented, you know, meeting people. People look to you as leaders. You know, they really... You know, I do a lot of work at the YMCA in my neighborhood with Bridges and training people for being spiritual health leaders, we call it. We're trying to train spiritual health leaders. And man, that's a great, you know, way to build relationships. Yeah. So those are the two big challenges that people get confused about. If you've got to love it, and it should put you in contact with the people who you're called to reach. If you do those two things. Now see, the salary, what happens is, a lot of time, whatever that is, means you make less money. Right? You're not taking the job that's in the big office building on the 4th floor that makes $100K a year. You know, instead you're working for $30,000. That's where the fundraising comes in, right? You're not... I wouldn't encourage you to try to fundraise an entire salary. Pretty tough in America. It's a high cost of living here. You know, you've got missionaries overseas who are living on $1,000 a month and approaching the same people you're approaching. So we encourage bridge leaders, if you're going to raise support, don't try to raise the whole thing. It's just tough. You know, go for half and then supplement. So, you know, and I really encourage multiple income streams, right? You've got, okay, I'm a yoga instructor. Okay, I've raised some money. We have a church grant, right? And I've got some investments that make some money. Or I get into a real estate deal with someone. You know, be entrepreneurial in every area of your life. Be entrepreneurial in the financial side of your life. Don't just be entrepreneurial in church planning, okay? Use those skills. Yeah.
I have a question. So we've had a little bit of experience raising money, but I'm just curious how to transition a one-time giver, some big fish that you know they can give.
Okay, so they're a person with capacity.
Into a like a giver, a continual giver. Just like.
So they've made one gift.
Yeah.
Okay. Engage, meaning how can you engage that person in your ministry? Is there a vision? Like, I'll just run through a number of examples. We have a wine and cheese event where we have 2 bridge leaders coming in to tell their stories about how God's changing the lives of unchurched people. And we invite that person who's given once to meet these 2 leaders and interact with some of our own other supporters and meet. And we have maybe 5 or 6 bridge leaders total, and they get a little more excited and a little bit more invested. take them out for coffee and find out what the person's, another idea, take them out for coffee, ask them to go out for coffee. Just because you want to get to know them better, you appreciate the support of their ministry. Find out what they're passionate about, right? Don't go and say, here's what I want you to give to. Go out and find out what, tell me you gave, I was wondering what prompted you to give? What is it about this ministry that really excites you? And what's your bigger vision? Like, what are you trying to accomplish in the world? You know, not just about what do you think about this ministry, but, you know, people with capacity normally have some kind of vision or focus. Like, we had a one time, I had a family that gave $10,000 to me the first year, okay? And I called them again for the next year, and they said, well, and see, now I communicated with them all year, right? I don't just get the gift, I start communicating. But, about a year went by, and I called them and said, hey, I wondered if we could get together for a cup of coffee. I'd like to give you an update on the ministry and see if you're interested in continue to invest this coming year. Well, Jim, you left the church, and we really wanted to support you that first year, but we're really not thinking to continue. Our passion is children. We really want, we have a foundation, and almost everything we give to has to do with helping children. And we just made an exception to, invest in your ministry last year because we really care about you. But, we're thinking that we want to start investing more with our existing ministries. I said, children? You love children? Well, wow, I'd love to introduce you to one of our bridge leaders who has a ministry to pregnant teenage girls in high school, who she helps them get through graduation, and she's actually started a church from, because they had babies, and the babies got bigger, and some of the dads started coming, and, it's like, it's amazing. I'd love to see how this person is helping pregnant. Well, we ended up with a lunch with that person, and they gave $5,000 for that ministry. So finding out what their passion is, and then, and they gave $5,000 for my ministry. And I didn't, we didn't, it wasn't like, so it's about relationship and finding out what the person's passion is and helping them to connect. People with capacity normally don't go, what's your vision? How can I support you? Okay, people with capacity usually have a vision, and you explain how your vision fits into their bigger vision. I've made that mistake. I've sat down with somebody with capacity and spent too much time explaining my vision. You want to know what their vision is.
On that note, if you were gonna share your vision with a group of people, like we're actually going home in a couple of weeks and
Right.
gonna have like a dinner and share our vision with people that have known us for a long time.
Right.
How would you communicate that in a way that, if you have a large group of people, kind of fits into maybe what their vision is?
Yeah. If you have a large group of people, you have to gauge. When we have group events and bridges, we do not ask for money. Okay? We haven't had one of these big annual fundraisers where you ask everybody to give at the table. Okay? We have small groups of like 20, 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually don't want them to write a check that night. Because generally when you ask people to give and they write a check for $100, $200, maybe $500. They give it to you, and that's the end. Right? What you want is monthly giving, annual giving. People with medium capacity give monthly. People with foundations and larger capacity give annually, generally. So if you have this gathering, you have to ask, are these annual givers or monthly givers? Right? And what I prefer to do is, my selling point for that night is having a cup of coffee with you. What I'm asking you to do tonight is commit to meeting with me personally so I can learn more about you and share more specifically about the ministry.
What if you only have a week?
That's a
You know,
problem,
and
isn't it?
yeah, and it's people that I've known my whole life. So it's not like I
Right.
don't know where they are. It's just that in I don't know that we have the time to meet
Right.
with everybody individually.
Right, but, well, phone calls, right? So
Okay.
then you can follow up with, I'd like to have a personal chat with you on the phone to talk about the ministry, to answer your questions individually. So you can follow up with a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
You can do if they're a little tech savvy, you can do a Skype, right? So like my wife has a number of contacts in Ohio and in the Ohio area, okay, from when she was growing up. Well, we can't go visit there and spend lots of time. What she's doing is she's writing a letter to those individual contacts. There's a kind of a standard letter, and then she's doing some handwriting,
Mm-hmm.
and it basically says, we're going to call you. So we mail the letter, we let it sit for a week, then I give them a call and I say, would you be interested in learning more? And my hope is to, you see this little PowerPoint presentation I have here. It's a little presentation I have on our ministry and the vision. Okay? So my hope is that I'll be able to share my screen with them. We can be on the phone and I can give them a little presentation while we're on the phone. And ask them questions, hear from them. So I'm going to try to do it remotely. Similar method to if I was there in person.
So
Yeah.
sorry, can I just
Okay.
have one
Yeah,
follow-up?
follow up.
So for if you would have a large group kind of dinner, you would just share your vision and then from that dinner hope to set up individual.
Yeah, I'm trying to get their contact information and what they're interested in. And you can have on here, I'm interested in supporting you monthly,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm interested in supporting you annually. Okay, so they can indicate that they're financially willing. But what I'm trying to avoid is I could ask for money that night and I'll get 6 different checks and I might get $1,000 total. I'd rather meet with 2 people, have 2 successful $100 monthly gifts.
Yeah.
Now I'm at $1,200. Now I've done $2,400 from that event rather than $1,000, and it repeats, right? So I don't have to keep going back. If you have to keep going back to every, and my policy is if I'm going to meet personally with someone, I do not ask for less than $100 a month. If you're asking for less than $100 a month, that's not a coffee, that's a mailing, right? So if people are in that range where they really don't have the capacity to give $100 a month, you don't need to follow up with all this personal stuff. You just send them an envelope in the mail and say, thanks for coming to the dinner, and we're hoping that you can give financially, and give them a response card for monthly, annually, one time.
And then how does Bridges, after they get like their funding, then, during the year, what does it look like with the follow-up? Like, are there monthly emails or something that are sent to say, hey, this is what this ministry is doing, and thanks for your support? Is it like a monthly thing, or what kind of things do they have to?
So what kind of communication goes out to donors?
Yeah.
So every bridge leader does their own communication to their own donors, right? So they should be doing a monthly thing. And then Bridges as a whole, we send out a monthly thing. So we have that kind of, and it's mostly email based. Mailings cost. So the more email you can do with that. And generally, and most of our emails down at the bottom you can click, and it takes you to a website where people can give. All the Bridges leaders who have accounts, the mechanism's there for people to give electronically. Yeah.
How do you keep people from being full-time fundraisers? I mean, it seems, I mean,
That's funny.
it seems like, it's like, okay, you get a part-time job and then you do part-time work, but then it's like, well, wait, is it a part-time job, part-time fundraising, part-time, part-time ministry? So, it seems like fundraising is a huge undertaking, and you hear of nonprofits that all they do is write grant letters, and they don't have time to do their work anymore.
And so the question is, how do you keep people from spending all their time doing fund development and not doing ministry? We have not had that problem at all. We have the opposite problem. Most Americans do not enjoy doing fund development. When they have a wrong idea about it, that it's about raising money for me, and they're embarrassed to ask, and 2, they just don't like doing it. So our problem is not people spending too much time. Our problem is people not spending enough time. If you can spend 5 hours a week on fund development, that'd be great.
How do you get over I hate doing this kind of stuff. This is like people that I've known my whole life, and if I ask them for money, they're going to give me money, but I hate it. I just really hate
Absolutely
it.
hate it. Yep.
So what should I do?
Get a coach. Get a coach. See, all of this, the missionary skills to cross the river and the skills to develop a stable financial base for your ministry, these are habits and patterns of life. Okay, this isn't a new idea. This is a behavior. To change behavior, you cannot go to a seminar. A one-day seminar is not going to help you. Coming to this thing today is not going to help you. What we do in Bridges is we have a support group for every leader where you're meeting monthly, kind of this kind of thing, right? Then we have a coach for every leader. And that's for the ministry. Then we have a special coach just for fund development. That's all this, we have 2 of them now. That's all these, we have 1 female, 1 male. That's all they do is they help missionaries raise funds. That's their profession, right? They're experts at it. They're great. So it's that you're not going to suddenly do this well. You're going to take a year of coaching and working with your spouse and realigning the pattern of your life so that this is part of your ministry. And if you view fund development as something you do in addition to your ministry, it's not going to work. Because when I'm doing fund development, I'm doing discipleship. My ministry is to the unchurched over here, but when I'm talking to someone from the bridge, someone from the church culture, that's my chance to do discipleship with them. When I explain to them the vision of the unchurched, the difference, I show them all this picture. Every one of my supporters, my financial supporters, I've talked through this with them, right? I talk with them, we talk about their children who are now on the other side. See, their kids have left the church. They're not going to church anywhere. They're the de-churched, right? So I'm discipling them on how to love their children and giving them hope that there's a whole group of Christian leaders in America now that are leaving church culture to go after their kids. There are a lot of parents out there who would love to support you financially because you're going where their kids went. And they know their kids aren't coming to church. They've tried, they've asked, they've pleaded, they've begged. They have holidays where they make them go to church. They've tried everything and it hasn't worked. And here you are having a cup of coffee with them and saying, I care about those folks. I'm not content to stay on the bridge and enjoy my Bible studies and my tea times and my women's sewing group and a nice youth group with a pizza party. I'm willing to change all of my friends, where I live, to go be with your kids. They're ready to give. They're just waiting. We got back on fund development some, right? But view fund development as part of your ministry. You're discipling the unchurched and you're discipling the churched. Because this is what it means to follow Jesus. See, when Jesus said, follow me, we didn't follow him to the temple or the synagogue, right? You followed him out into the wilderness. You followed him out to the Jordan River to be where the people gather. If we say we're following Jesus, in some way we all have to participate. You can stay on the bridge and support the people who are going out. You can cross the river yourself with half of your life and try that, and you can go all the way, right? But we're all called to follow Jesus. And this is what Jesus does. Jesus leaves the 99 and goes after the one. And we need to learn that. This is a new thing in America. Like, when we had a more homogenous culture around America, the church worked because it wasn't the only mechanism of discipleship in America. In the past, you didn't go to church to get discipled. You went to church to get to worship. Discipleship happened in the home, at work, At school, there was prayer in schools. Your boss was a Christian. You were expected to be honest at work. You were expected to have integrity, right? You went to the YMCA, and it was like everywhere in American society you went, Christian values, principles, biblical stories were being infused into everyone's life. And so the church didn't take full responsibility for discipleship. They took full responsibility for worship. When the whole society changes, now who's got discipleship? Again, the church didn't change. The church didn't suddenly stop doing discipleship. We never built the church for that. We built the church for worship. Right? So let's not get down on the church. The church as it is in America has done a great job. It's a great church. Of course it can be improved. Of course we can do better. But generally, any institution that is reaching 100 million people, wow, let's celebrate that. Whatever problems we have, God's at work there. And then let's learn these new skills in this new environment to cross the river and engage with the folks who just don't have 1 ounce of church culture in their bones. All right, so summary: make your funding strategy match your church planning strategy, match your people that you're reaching. Right? Don't get stuck. The biggest mistake I see is people who have a traditional church plant funding mechanism and are trying to reach people who are in a mission field. And it might be 50 years before they're ready for a self-sustaining public worship service. So look for the match. All right? Let's pray together. Okay. Gracious God, thank you for leading us into mission. Thank you for crossing cultures before we even knew what that was about. Thank you for coming to us. Thanks for speaking our language. God, thank you for eating our food and hanging out with sinners and prostitutes and tax collectors. And Lord, forgive us when we act like the Pharisees. Lord, I know you had some really harsh words for them. And Lord, so many out there have heard those harsh words and think that that's what we're saying about the unchurched. Lord, forgive us for that. And help us to go be with them, Lord. May they know we love them because we're their friend. Lord, I pray for each person around this table, God, that you would clarify their vision, Lord. Show them what you're calling them to, Lord. Reveal yourself more fully. Reveal your plan more fully, we pray, God. Lord, I pray you'd give them the self-discipline to pray and read your word and sit quietly before you and seek out that space and time, Lord, where they can hear your voice. And Lord, I pray that you'd give them the courage to find the new patterns of life that fit that call. Lord, we pray you provide financially for each and every one, Lord. Lord, the right kind of work. Lord, we pray for marriages and relationships. Lord, that you'd enable them to envision together. And Lord, bring them both along to the same vision. And Lord, I pray for the children of those around the table, Lord, that you would help them to grow up to know you and love you and serve you. Lord, may the way we work together and the way we serve you be something that inspires our children, we pray. Lord, we pray that the way we serve you would not be wearisome to our kids. Lord, we pray you'd open their hearts to you, that your spirit would flow into our children, that they'd know the peace and joy of worship and being in your presence. So, Lord, we commit ourselves to you, confident that you are the God who leads us in mission. Thanks, Lord. We give ourselves to you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.